Hi, good afternoon. We're here with Mark Kendall from Pullman Instruments. How you doing, Mark?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Thanks very much for joining us. As always, every guest I ask the same thing to each person who comes on. If you could give us a little bit of an introduction as to who you are, what it is you do, and how long you've been doing it for, please, Mark.
Indeed. Okay, so you've already said who I am, but I'll do it again. I'm Mark
Yeah,
Kendall. I work for a company that's based in Harrogate called Pullman Instruments.
yeah.
Um, it is a family-owned business, essentially. Colin Smith, who was the original founder of the organisation, he started it in 1980.
Wow.
He was working for a company in Leeds, and he realised that there was an opportunity to do something for himself, and he started the business up in 1980. He had a partner and his wife working with him, and then I joined in 1982. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the youth training schemes or youth opportunity
YTS?
schemes, the YTS scheme. So 6 months before I left school, I'd pretty much kind of secured the fact that I'd be leaving school, but I'd be going on to one of the YTS schemes, and
Mhm.
Colin had agreed to do it. So essentially, it meant that for 6 months, I'd learn new skills. It was my dad. My dad and Colin were quite close friends, and my dad got sick of me taking appliances apart at home and not being able to put them back together. So he thought, you know what, you need to learn how to do this.
Yeah,
You're gonna
get
learn
paid
a
for it.
skill. So it was actually just a nice transition into something that I think I've probably got an aptitude for, but didn't really know how to. Um, and then it kind of just escalated from there. I've pretty much done everything that you can think of in the business. I started as a very low entry level operative technician, getting my hands dirty, cleaning instruments, labeling things up. And then I started to develop the skills that you would consider they're quite niche and unique. So we'd get involved in looking at some of the equipment that in those days was quite analog, and it was analog. Literally, it was a needle and a scale. So when you measured a signal, that needle moved, and it gave you a reading. Pretty much most of what we saw was that type of equipment,
Yeah,
and I got the opportunity to learn how to uh, fix, maintain, strip, literally take down to bare bones and put back together. So, there were some really useful skills that I developed, and it's obviously escalated now to the point where I day to day, like I said to you earlier, I run the business for the owner. He's very much trusting and does not get involved because he admits it himself that he doesn't know enough about what we do.
yeah,
And why should he want to step in and try and do what we do when we're the ones that have got the expertise? So, and I am grateful that he's very understanding, and he does allow us to do what we're good at, really.
yeah.
We have developed skill sets. Myself and the other directors have developed skill sets over decades in this industry. So we'd like to think that to some extent we do have some expertise.
Yeah, well, definitely with all that experience, yeah. So,
Yeah.
what would you say makes you different from other people in your sector then? Well,
So,
I'll take a step back. What kind of customers do you have? Who are you making instruments for? And then what would you say makes you different?
so interestingly, so we are a small Harrogate-based company, or we were. We've fledged out a little now. We've actually bought other businesses. So we currently have five other companies within the group, which is the Everett Smith Group. Um, Four of them, or three of them actually, currently are incorporated into Pullman Instruments. One of them stands alone at the moment, but I suspect that will get merged into Pullman this year. And then we have a separate sister company up in Scotland that they do similar types of work. They do work on climate chambers, but again, it's service and calibration, very much centered around what we do. We our client base, believe it or not, for a small company, two of our biggest customers are the NHS and Network Rail.
Wow.
And these are not small contracts. These are Network Rail has been a 5 year with it. They've just put another extension on it. And literally there are 3 business units for Network Rail. One is for England, one is for Scotland, and one is for Wales. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine that is looking after all of their maintenance equipment that they'll use on any aspect of the rail network that they're supporting. And we look after Scotland and Wales. For a small company, it's quite high profile.
Yeah, definitely something to be proud of there in Harrogate.
When we tendered for the work 5 years ago, it was on a weighted basis. So they basically scored your credibility based on the answers that you gave, the whole aspect of your infrastructure, what your business profile was, historically what you've done for them. I tendered for all 3 of them, and I kind of didn't anticipate in any way, shape, or form that we'd get a sniff at England, because Wales is about 300 grand, Scotland is a little bit less. England was over £1 million a year, that is. And we were 2 points away from winning all of it. We didn't get England. But if we'd have got England, that would have been it would have been broke the straw that broke the camel's back, really. So we were greatly relieved.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, but in a positive way, that I think we realised we just weren't ready for it. Mm-hmm. 5 years on, and we're going to be coming up to that tender process again. And the reason we didn't get the award was that we didn't have the infrastructure in place to support the size of the contract. Well, we now have 5 labs.
Excellent.
So we do have an infrastructure in place that we can promote and offer as a service, knowing that there's going to be somebody that's going to be one of our labs within a 1 to 2 hour radius of any site, really.
Excellent. That's good.
Absolutely spot on. This is kind of what we did. When we got together as directors, there was like a 5 year, 8 year, and 10 year plan. Mm-hmm. And part of that plan was to actually buy companies that gave us geographically advantageous locations, so that we could take advantage of them when the time came. Not just the resources that they gave us, but actually the potential to tap into bigger opportunities like this.
That's brilliant. I like the 5-10 year planning process that you're going through there, and demonstrating, that ambition to keep the company going in the right direction.
If you ask me if we're on track, I couldn't really tell you, but I think we're not far off.
Yeah, I'm sure you could get the information to hand.
I think when you look at it, we had 2 options. It was either growth through startups. We would actually open up a building, build the assets within that part of the business. So we would have to start afresh somewhere. Yeah. But one of the concerns that I raised was, well, it's actually taken us 20 years to get where we are now. Mm-hmm. I think we just have to understand that to get where we are now, starting again will take another 20 years. And do we really want to wait that long to get any kind of return? Yeah. So the sensible thing is to buy established companies, look at their setup, look at how their synergies are in relation to us. What have they got that we haven't? What can we take advantage of? And really, that's kind of been the project planning from that point onwards. And it has proved quite successful, really.
Good stuff. So would you say your business journey to date has been successful, if it was one word you describe it in, or are there any other words?
Well, I'd like to think so. I took over from the owner, because I think it was, I don't know if it was 2008. Colin, who was the business owner, he'd done the same thing. He'd looked at, actually, well, what we need to think about is, do we need to buy another business so that business can help support and allow us to invest within both companies? So he bought another business in Harrogate called Flowmon. And at the time, his son Nathan, who is now the owner, he worked at Jaguar Land Rover. He was one of their senior buyers. So he decided, right, well, why don't you just come and run Flowmon? And pretty much at that point, I think Colin was ready to retire, you know.
Yeah.
So what they did was they did a buyout. Nathan bought his dad out, gave him money to retire. And I think the intention was that I would be tutored and nurtured by Colin and you know, kind of shadowed and mentored. But unfortunately, within probably 6 or 8 weeks of going through the process of doing the buyout, Colin started to feel quite ill. And he did end up going to the doctors, and the doctors, you know, told him that, well, sorry, but you know, we found some issues with your esophagus. And you know, it was diagnosed that he'd got esophageal cancer. And he literally just came in one morning and he said to me, right, Mark, it's over to you. I can't do this anymore. And actually, I just thought to myself, right, this is something that I've really got to grasp the reins of, because he's not going to be around to help me. And it gives me an opportunity to do what I would like to do rather than be schooled in something that probably wouldn't have fitted well with me.
Yeah.
You know, Colin was not technical. He was very good at running a business, but when it came to the technicalities of what we do, he relied on others to do that. But for me, being both, having both the business acumen and the technical acumen does give a major advantage when it is that when you're dealing with clients, because you're able to talk to them at a very similar level.
Yeah. Excellent. I like again, there's a number of things coming through there of different types of business leadership and how you can run a business, and the technical aspects as well as the leadership aspects, and people bring different things to the table, and you taking on the mantle and doing it your own way and being allowed to do it, and Colin having a hands-off approach and letting you go and do that.
It is interesting that I kind of, I don't know how, and I certainly don't know why, but a lot of things tended to make sense. I think fortunately what I'd been able to do for a lot of years, whenever Colin went on holiday, I sat in his chair. So I was talking to the customers. I developed those relationships. I got to know what customer service started to look like.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't leave school with anything other than what you'd consider a normal education. But I think common sense did dictate that, I kind of realized that actually I kind of do get what customers want. So I do know what I also need to deliver. So it became quite familiar. But it wasn't until about maybe 5 years ago, just before COVID, a couple of years before COVID, I got the opportunity to actually do a business management degree, and I snapped it up because I just thought, you know what, I might know how to do this theoretically, but I'd like to be able to see, what it actually looks like on paper. So I did one of these in placement degrees. So you did it while you were working. Took
How did you
about
find
3 years, but it was interesting as I started to do the studies. When you could see straight away, oh yeah, I get that. Oh yeah, that makes sense.
A
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
that's why
theory.
we were doing it that way.
Yeah.
So it just became very familiar. I thought to myself, well, at least we were doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite often the way that you can see in those normally people do it the other way around, don't they? They go and have their theoretical education and then go and attempt to apply it into business. But yeah, it's an interesting way around of doing things, and that you can understand that, oh yeah, I grasped that without having to, I learned
Yeah,
it on the job, so to speak.
you can kind of get, and I don't know if there's a lot of talk about this at the moment, but I kind of have the feeling that sometimes the practical application makes more sense than the theory.
Yes.
People relate to that much easier. And if you can show somebody how to do something rather than try and tell them how to do it, I think they tend to remember it better,
It's like
because we're
kids.
very repetitive in the way that we work.
Yeah, makes sense. So on sort of lessons and education then, what if there's one lesson you could pull out of your 42 years, what would that be?
Don't work so hard. No, just kidding.
You're
I
working a
think
few things.
working hard is what has got us to where we are today.
Yeah,
As an example, when I took over, we had 17 members of staff and turned over £700,000. This year we'll have done over 4 million, and there's now 47 of us. So there's been
brilliant.
quite a. It wasn't rapid the growth, but it was just a very steady and progressive growth over what the 2 decades really. In my opinion, I prefer to grow that way. If I grew too fast, we'd probably experience some really nasty pain.
Yeah.
If I was to think about what do I think my standout moments are, or what do you think I've learned, or I said to you earlier actually about protecting margins. I think that's one of the keys to this. I think if you are running a business and it's a small business, at the end of the day, we're wholly dependent on those people that do work for us and making sure that they pay us. That there's a relationship. It's a mutual trust that we'll do the job they want us to do, and likewise they'll pay us. That we make sure that we watch what we're doing so that we can remain viable. They're trusting that our business is going to keep their business going.
Yeah.
The sector, or certainly the service and calibration field that we operate within, everything that we do underwrites what our customers do. When we issue a certificate, that certificate has got to be able to stand up in a court of law.
Yeah.
So any work that they do and any questions that are thrown in their direction about actually how do you know that equipment's right, the first thing that comes out of the drawer is a Pullman Instruments certificate that has all of the data and demonstrates the characteristics of the equipment that they've been using, because it acts almost like an insurance certificate.
It's big responsibility that you've got for your customers.
So yeah, watch the margins, make sure that we've got our systems in place. Make sure they're stress tested, make sure that any equipment that we use is up to the task. Because there's always got to be a margin of difference between our standards and the work the testing that we do. We've got to demonstrate that we're better than the equipment that we test. It's technologically quite interesting and quite in depth. What else? Let me think. I would like to say that actually some of the things that are crucial. I know you did, one of the questions was what advice would I give to other small businesses. One of the things that I think has helped us absolutely not necessarily stand out, because guess what, we are in a very competitive sector. But one of the things that I kind of learned very quickly was that if all that you're ever going to be is the same as your nearest rival, you're always going to fight for the same work, and it's always going to be driven by cost. So only the cheapest will win. And I just thought to myself, okay, we need to step away from this. We need to create some differentiators. Not that it makes us any different, but what it does is it just gives us a bit of breathing space, and we can find little niche opportunities or services that will set us apart somewhat. Because in this industry, there's some really, really big players that are global companies. They turn over hundreds of millions of pounds a year. And all of my working life, I've always looked at them and thought to myself, how do I get to that stage? How do I become like them? How do we, get to the point where we're doing what they do? And it's not to say that all of it's possible. It doesn't mean to say that you can't try. And that's ultimately what I think we've done. We kind of realised that our clients, they trust the fact that if you're going to talk to them in a way that you can demonstrate to them that you know what you're talking about and that you kind of come across as somewhat of an expert, actually that does secure work. And for anybody that's starting up as a business, know your stuff, I think, is one of the key things that I would say to people.
Brilliant. Good advice there. And that also links in terms of you finding your niches within what you do and not competing on price. you mentioned about your margins and being able to keep those for the viability of the business and your differentiators. It's a nice link. So what inspires you to do what you do, Mark? When going into work on a day-to-day basis, what do you use for inspiration to get up?
Opportunity. I think the opportunity to do something different, to develop what we're doing. Certainly over the last couple of years, we've made some big steps into developing new processes. So again, going back to these little niche differentiators, we did that deliberately because we realized that actually if we did create a slightly different profile to our competition, we could use our competition as customers.
Yeah.
So our competition send their work to us because they can't do it.
Fantastic. Love that as a strategy.
It made perfect sense, really.
Yeah.
And what we've done is we've continued to build on that. So over the last 18 months, 2 years, we applied for some grant funding. We've managed to get some new equipment that means that we can offer disciplines that others can't. And again, we did that last year. We did a grant funding application so that we could, again, enhance our capability. So we do it in two ways. We might buy acquisitions through companies that enhance our abilities, but then we'll look at actually, well, what discipline do we need that we know our clients are looking at and looking for? So we've done that. We've bought equipment that have created a new discipline that we can offer as an ongoing service to our customers. And we've done 3 or 4. And what we're seeing is that actually it helps build confidence in our customers because they know that they're actually getting quality service. And it, again, that little niche just pushes a little bit further away from our competition.
Yeah. And so is it
that's what excites me.
That opportunity and seeing those gaps and
working out what we need, looking at the system, looking at the equipment, looking to see if we can invest in it. If we invest in it, what is it going to do for us? If we send equipment away to other companies because we don't have that capability, that's what we look at. So okay, it makes sense for us to actually take those aspects back in-house.
Sure.
So that not only do we save the money, but we then open that up as a service to a whole client base, which is what tends to drive us to do what we do. But looking at and doing the research and finding out, and I think that's one of I love that aspect of what I do.
I love that, and I'm going to take away what we call a BFO, action coach, blinding flash. It's not actually a blinding flash to the obvious, but it's a light bulb moment for something to take away for me, which I've written down, is how can we supply our competition and make them a customer? It's a great way great question to ask yourself in order to maintain a position in the market.
Yeah, and the thing is that. So our competition spend quite a bit of money with us because I think they know how complex it is to actually start putting these systems in place. They know that they've got to invest a lot of money. They know they've also got to employ somebody that's got that skill set. We don't have to do that because we've already got it. So why shouldn't we take advantage of it?
Awesome. Love that. Thanks, Mark. So lastly, wrapping it up, in terms of any latest news about what you're up to, sort of future of the business, or even it's a case of letting us know about your website where we can find more information about you, please feel free.
Yeah. So what we're doing this year is it's something we've talked about for a while. I think you'd agree that anybody that's looking to make any kind of purchase, the first thing that we all do is go online. It's almost as if Amazon has driven us that way, haven't they? Really,
that's the way AI will be as well. You'll just say,
absolutely, that's the way it's always going to go. One of the things that we've not had in place is we've not had a web shop which gives anybody that don't even know who we are an opportunity to think, okay, well, I need to buy a pressure meter or I want a thermometer. And we've got that information and that product available to them, because not only does it mean that we've created a sale, but we've created an opportunity to develop that sale into something more.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a new kind of facility that's coming on board this year. It's a new element. We've never had it before. I'm really keen to get that up and running. We already know what products we're going to put on there. And we're targeting initially a very specific sector, but it's a specific sector that we know people are always looking for this bottom entry type equipment, and it will be, it's new, the new branded products. We already do work for the company. I really like them, so it's an opportunity to introduce them into the market as well. I'm quite excited about what that's going to do for us.
When are you launching that, you think?
I think it's probably going to be maybe start to mid quarter 2.
Cool.
There's a bit of work to do on it still, but we're nearly there. So yeah, it'd be nice to, and everything that we then do on that web shop links across to the website. So things that weren't visible become visible very quickly to these potential customers. We've done some work on social media last year. I think we're going to probably carry that on. I'm not. It's not that I'm not a fan of it. I just don't have, if I'm running a business, I don't have time to be sat trying to work out what it is that we're going to promote this week. I outsourced it, so and there's been some good feedback actually, to be honest. Certainly from some of our existing customers, they've liked the the content that we've been putting out there. So much so that they've been asking us, okay, how have you done it? What have you done to go about it? Because they're seeing that they're not visible enough in the way that they should be.
Yeah.
So that's been an interesting aspect for last year, and something that I think will continue. And as I mentioned, those disciplines that we've brought on board, so the torque meter inside, the high vacuum, the torque multiplier side, these are quite niche disciplines that are going to become quite front and center as this next year goes on.
Enough for the next 42 years to keep you
Yeah, I'll be here another 12, I think, before I retire. But I don't know. I don't know what. I think I'd be bored out of my mind, to be honest.
Hand it over to somebody else. Awesome.
Yeah, you can only play so much golf and go, before you realise that, okay, so I kind of miss what I did.
Yeah. Well, massive part of your life, Mark.
It's hard, isn't it, when you've done something for so long?
Oh, yeah.
To suddenly stop overnight. I just don't know what that's going to look like.
Well, that's it. You're having to change an identity, aren't you? In
totally.
A way of working that you have done for 42 years, or transferring into a different life. But that's a whole new podcast, that is, about identity and how you transition.
It's called What Comes Next.
Yeah. Maybe there's an idea for the future. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Absolute pleasure talking with you, and I wish you all the best.
Yes, thank you. Nice to meet you.